Welcome back to Money Matters. I'm David Kroll from Mortgage Network, and this is Emily Johnson from Polaris Capital. And we are looking at the economic chaos following the election. This is Friday. The election was Tuesday.
Veterans Day.
Friday, Veterans Day. The election was Tuesday. So we've had two and a bit business days for the world markets to react. Now, one of the very biggest moves, one of the very biggest reactions has been in the bond market. The bond market is most easily tracked or most easily kind of understood, if you want to do it on a daily basis, by simply tracking the 10-year Treasury bill. If you track that, then you've got a sort of little window into the bond market. And then you don't have to get all technical and try to figure out all the other stuff that's going on there. The 10-year Treasury, about a month ago, was at pretty much an all-time low. It was in the high 1.38, 1.39, low 1.4, 1.41, 1.42, 43, 44. Extraordinary. 30-year fixed rate mortgages were down at 3.375 and very stable at 3.5. So from day to day, they would shift between the two. Today, 2 days after the election, the bond yield has jumped to 2.13.
Which is that? So that's a from where it was two days ago. That's a 50%.
50%
run
40
in 2 days. That doesn't sound like a lot when you think about 2%, but
right.
The increase, it's a 50% increase in yield in 2 days.
So it's the same as going to Las Vegas and getting 3 to 2 odds. I mean, it's pretty darn good.
Or waking up and suddenly having your mortgage be 50% more expensive. That's
50% more expensive. That's another good way of doing it. Now, our mortgage rates have not. This is where it gets interesting. They have not moved up to suit. The 10-year Treasury is the bellwether of the bond market. It has gone up, percentage-wise, a huge amount. And we don't know where it's headed next. We think that it's going to settle there and perhaps go even a little bit higher. However, the market is still absolutely voraciously seeking yield. And there's billions and tens of billions, hundreds of billions of dollars looking for an interest rate that is better than 1 or 1.5 or 2. And that money is immediately soaking up mortgage securities, bonds and treasury bills of all kinds, and it's soaking them up. So the market yields have not gone up that much. I mean, we're still lending, as of yesterday, we were lending at a thin 3.875.
So what I find interesting about that is of course we've been expecting, I mean there's lots of things that are interesting about that, but we've been expecting that the Fed would increase interest rates in December. Unlikely in November. And what is the likelihood in December now? I know we had been somewhere around 70-something% likelihood in December. Is that still the case?
That's still the case.
So if we expect that interest rates are going to go up and the whole market expects that interest rates are going to be increased in December, does that mean that this move that we've had is just simply pricing in that increase now because it's more of a guarantee? Or is that going to mean that it's in addition to what the expectation is going to be? And also, what does that mean and what is the impact going to be on foreign bonds? Because the spread between our treasuries and foreign bonds of the same maturity is substantial and getting bigger. And that's a good thing, but at the same time, it could also mean a huge run of cash into the United States and a huge increase in the value of the dollar, which sometimes is
which will also
drive
and that
rates
money
back down.
And that money has to go somewhere. I mean, it just doesn't get. You remember several months ago we talked about the odd phenomenon at U.S. Bank and at New York Bank at the big holding banks in New York, in Manhattan. They were charging a negative rate for deposits of $100 million or more. In other words, if you were shipping money into the United States because of safe haven, and you had no specific place to put it because you had no investment that looked good to you, and you had the odd $200 million kicking around.
That's a nice problem to have.
Well, you're a Finnish pension fund or something, and you want to throw 200 million temporarily. You are having to pay a fee for that safety, and the odd situation that we find ourselves in now is that as Emily said, our rates are going to be profoundly higher than the other first world nations of Japan and Germany and Switzerland, and this negative flow of capital is going to accelerate, and it's going to cause all kinds of interesting things for us to talk about.
For example, we've had the expectation that European central banks and other central banks would either keep their interest rates flat or perhaps even lower them again. Some of them are already in negative territory. Some of them were right on it. Right now, that would be very, very unlikely. And we've talked about before, and you've said it several times, that again, that rising tide theory, that if we're increasing rates, the rest of the world probably will need to do it in tandem to keep up. But can they keep up? But you could also argue that our lack of growth with a massive stimulus on the table of basically zero interest rate for how many years it was at zero. It didn't stimulate what we expected.
It didn't prove to be the stimulus that we thought it would.
So it's interesting. I mean, here we have all these other nations that have done the same thing, that are back down to zero, doing the same thing that we did, because I'm sure that is the standard central bank school of thought, that when that's that. But it didn't necessarily work for us. Now here we are seeing our interest rates bump back up. It's very likely that they will be able to, those other central banks will be able to keep their interest rates either solid or have to increase them, which is, it's just another interesting economic philosophy. It really turns a lot of what we learned in school on its head.
On its head. and this is one of the interesting things that you may see as a consequence of the Trump presidency, which is a series of policies which are not in any way attached to conservative orthodoxy, and which liberals did not have quite frankly, the chutzpah to push through, even though they are traditionally liberal policies. So you're going to see some very odd things happening, I think. You're going to see huge public works projects. You're going to see,
which will be done through bond issuances.
Bond issuances, and it's essentially stimulative. Government-backed spending. You're going to see huge job programs, which are traditionally a liberal move, which the liberals never did effectively. So the middle class really did suffer terribly by this shift to modernity.
It's possible that those new job programs will be public-private partnerships versus what was attempted before, which was straight public partnership, public initiatives.
Liberals always have a tendency to go more purely public. But in a Trump administration, nevertheless, the overall impact is going to be an enormous amount of stimulative activity. Job programs, traditionally liberal, traditionally not part of the conservative portfolio, you're going to see happening through Trump in a way that the liberals could only have dreamed of.
Well, maybe the liberals can put part of their stamp on it, feel really good about it.
This is what Bernie Sanders is already saying. He's saying, look, there's a big overlap here, and the economy absolutely needs to get going. When the Democratic Party does its self-analysis, one of my most intelligent friends says that it's got to look at its traditional marriage to labor, which it deserted 20 years ago.
That's going to be very interesting to see.
So
it's going
to be interesting to see there.
Yeah. Very, very. So. For the first time, and I have to say, I mean, even having worked in finance since graduating from business school, and listening to CNBC every single day, just without stop. The other day, before the election, I finally turned my television to WHHI-TV because I couldn't stand listening to the pundits anymore. And I really would rather watch Property Brothers than listen to any more of the angry rhetoric that was going on. And for the first time in a while, it's actually exciting again to not just listen to CNBC, but to look at a lot of the different analysis stuff. There's not as much fun to read Facebook anymore, but it's a lot more fun to read the different analysts that are out there with the, largely opposing views still, but there seems like there's at least some sense of optimism, some sense of the change that's out there. And maybe I'm being the Pollyanna, but because I perpetually am. But
there's two sides to it. The stimulative side is going to be very interesting. The social policy side is going to be desperately antagonistic.
I say he starts with the financial
So
side.
he needs to stay
yeah.
as far away from the social policy side as he possibly can and work on the economic issues. So
All right.
there you go.
Okay, we have lots and lots to talk about, so please stick with us for next week on Money Matter. Until then, Money Matters, please send us your ideas. Check us out on Facebook. You can skip all the angry rhetoric. We don't have any of that.
Absolutely.
And we love your questions, thoughts, ideas. So until next week, have a wonderful one. This has been Money Matters.